Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh. The Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp. Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
Of all the things God could have chosen to create man out of, stars, air, water, he chose the dust of the ground, which is really just dirt. We get scared of these parts of our stories we think disqualify us, that we think will make people turn away from us rather than lean in.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Christy Wright Show, and Merry Christmas. I'm so excited to hang out with you guys this week as always, and we are talking this week about the importance of your story. I can't wait to share this with you and some special traditions that my family and I have had over the years when it comes to Christmas. And then I get to sit down with my new friend and author of her new book, Dirt, Mary Marantz. And she talks about not only her story, but how she can use her story to help others, and you can too. But first, let's talk about our stories. Now, many of you know I have shared this tradition with you before, but my husband and I have a Christmas tradition where every Christmas we sit down and write a letter of everything that happened that year before. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not great about journaling. Like ongoing throughout the year, I don't journal on a daily basis, but once a year, I make sure that I sit down and I write out all of the major things that happened that year. And then I write out my prayers and goals and dreams for the next year. And then I pack it up with my Christmas ornaments and I put it away and I don't touch it or see it until the next Christmas when we get our ornaments down out of the attic to decorate. Now, my husband and I, we write our letters totally separately. My letters are typically about 7 to 10 pages. My husband's are 7 to 10 words. If you know us, you know that it's very in line with our personality. And we unpack what happened that year. And it's always amazing, y'all, to pull these letters out of the attic and sit down and read them. And you read the words on the page and you see your tone and your fears and your perspective from a year ago and how quickly that can change. How much can happen in 1 year's time. Now, when you're sitting in that spot on the couch and you're writing out those words and those fears and those prayers, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the next year holds. If we have learned anything about 2020, we didn't know what this year held. We needed some kind of insurance policy last year to protect ourselves from this craziness. But a lot can happen in any year. In any year, a lot can happen in your life that you don't see coming. And when you're sitting in that spot writing those words, a lot of times it can feel like it doesn't have purpose. Your perspective is so limited, you think like, well, does this even matter? I'm going through a really hard time. Does this have any purpose? Am I ever going to get out of this? Is this going to last forever? You know, I actually brought my Christmas letter for you guys. I wrote it in this very, very attractive notebook. I have no idea where I got this notebook. Probably for free from somewhere. But my husband and I take turns and we pass it back and forth. So I'll write my letter and then I hand it to him and he writes his letter. So I just want to read you a couple of excerpts from my letter. This is from, let's see when it's from, December 30th, 2012, 8 years ago. Okay, here are some of the things I wrote. And I'm not editing it for you. I'm literally reading exactly what I wrote on the page. Here's what I wrote. I got a lot more speaking this year. I was a new speaker, not a Ramsey personality or anything at the time. I got a lot more speaking this year, and I launched several new products, including the custom college guide, which is just getting started. I really hope that it does well. I so enjoyed working on that partnership. That turned out to be a disaster, just so you know. It didn't work out well at all. Jenny and Hunter are doing great. He's definitely her husband. Can't wait to see her get married, hopefully next year. Yeah, they didn't get married. He wasn't the one at all. Jenny married a man named Charlie the next year. Who would have known, right? God gave me so many ideas this year, and I feel strongly I need to build a blog and write, but I'm not sure what that looks like. You know, when I read these words from 8 years ago that were so innocent and so naive, it's just almost comical to see what God had in store. Jenny did not marry Hunter. And I did end up writing, but not on my own personal blog. It was because God was going to bring me as a part of the Ramsey Solutions team and Ramsey personality. I think back to the products I worked on and how, to me, at that moment, that was the end all be all. And y'all, that one particular product did terribly, and it lasted less than a year. You just never know what God has in store for you. And when you're sitting where you are in this moment and you're looking ahead, you might feel like there are pieces of your story right now. There are pieces of your life or seasons that you're in that feel like they have no purpose and they're just really hard. But what I love is, in the grand scheme of things, in the big picture, in the kingdom of God, God works all things together for your good. Even the hard seasons, even the hard years, even those wilderness seasons where you're like, God has forgotten me, I am lost, I am lonely, or what am I doing? I'm in this job that I hate. I'm working 9 to 5 in a job to collect a paycheck, and I don't feel like I'm using my gifts, and I don't feel like I'm in my purpose. What am I doing with my life? You feel like Jack Nicholson, is this really as good as it gets? Do you know even those seasons, those moments, those jobs, those relationships, those wilderness journeys, God can use even those for your good. You know, I work with a lot of women through Business Boutique, and some of them are quilters, and I don't know anything about quilting, but I do know that you use little squares and you like sew them together and then a quilt appears. One of the things I think of when I think about stories, I think of it kind of like this quilt. In any given moment, you are in the middle of a square, and that square might not be the square you would choose. It might not look like what you want it to look like, but God can work all of these squares of our life. He can sew them all together and build this beautiful quilt as he writes our story. And it's so much bigger and so much better than we can see at any given snapshot in time. You know, there's another story that we talk about all the time, and I want to share this with you to encourage you, especially this time of year. We all know the Christmas story, and we talk about this story every Christmas. Many of you probably sit down with your family and read it from the book of Luke as you are celebrating the Christmas season to remember and refocus on the meaning of the season. I remember growing up with my mom's family, we would sit down every single Christmas. It was my mom, her brothers and sisters, so all my aunts and uncles, all my cousins, my grandmother, my grandfather, we'd sit down. But before we could open the presents, my granddad had to read the Christmas story. He would sit down and he would open up his old weathered Bible and he would begin to read from the book of Luke. Now, y'all, to a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old, that Christmas story felt like 7 hours long. I thought it's probably as long as all of the Psalms put together because seriously, it is the only thing standing between us and those presents under the tree. It felt forever. But he would always read it, and we would always celebrate the story of the birth of Jesus. We all do that every year. We celebrate this story, but what I've noticed is we really focus on Jesus. Of course we do. It's the birth of Jesus that we want to celebrate for the Christmas season. But in all of our celebrating and talking about this story and how God came to earth in the form of a baby and the humility and Emmanuel, God with us, sometimes we don't talk about one person that was a key player in this story. We don't talk about one person that was scared and made that whole story possible, and that's Mary. One normal, average girl. One girl that probably at the time didn't see her life turning out like that. One girl that was obedient to God's call. Now just think about how Mary must have felt at the time. She was unmarried. She has heard from God that she is going to give birth to a son. And she's like, how exactly is that going to happen? Because I don't know if you know, but we have, okay. So then she's going to have to explain this to Joseph, like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be pregnant and it's God. That's my baby. So that would be weird now. It was just as weird back then. She had to be faithful. You can't even imagine what type of things people would say about her in the community of how frowned upon this would be, that she would be pregnant outside of wedlock, and then, of course, claiming that she is carrying the Son of God. I can't even imagine the fears that she felt, the criticism that she experienced, and she had to walk forward in steps of faith in the story that God was writing for her. She was obedient to God writing her story, and because she was faithful to that, we have the Christmas story as we know it. And while you and I are not as awesome as Mary or have that call in our life exactly, I don't want to diminish that the same is true for you when God calls you and leads you and guides you in your own story. It has a purpose that you can't possibly see right now. It has meaning that you can't possibly fathom. There are plans that God has for you that are steps beyond the steps you can just see in front of you. There is purpose in your present. God is doing something in you right now, right where you are. I know that it's very easy to look ahead to next year and dream and wish and hope and set goals, and I want you to. I love looking ahead. I love anticipating what's next, but I don't want you to be so focused on the next that you miss the now, because God is in you right now. God is in your now. He is here. And I believe that if you seek him in your present, if you seek him in your story, every single chapter that he's writing, every single line that he's writing, even if you don't like it at the time, I believe that you will not only get closer to him, you will find more purpose for your present right where you are. All right, y'all, I'm so excited because I get to sit down with my new friend and author of the new book, Dirt, Mary Marantz. Mary, thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me, Christy. I'm excited.
So this is an interesting title. Let's just talk about it.
It really is,
Dirt.
yeah.
I love the tagline, growing strong roots in what makes the broken beautiful. Tell me about this. Why did you want to write this book? And tell me what the book is about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really great that you jumped right in on Dirt is an interesting title. And that subtitle is sort of like, my publisher was like, we really need to have like a much more redemptive subtitle with a title like Dirt.
To explain it.
They were a little concerned.
Totally, yeah.
A lot of people are like, Dirt? Actually, on the
But
way
it's
down
interesting.
here,
I like it because it makes you go, tell me more about that, you know?
Yeah, on the way down here, we actually called a store because I've yet to get to see it in person. And I said, oh, I'm calling to see if you have this book, Dirt. And she went, Dirt? I was like, yeah, Dirt.
I'm the author. Yeah, do you have it?
Exactly. I think what's really interesting is when this book was getting ready to come out, when we revealed the cover, I think there were a lot of people in my story, in my family, in my hometown who were maybe a little nervous. Because with a book like Dirt, that could go a lot of ways. It could be like,
what's she going to say?
Be a tell-all. Yeah. Where it could be like, I'm complaining about the dirt. Or I'm going to like over-exaggerate the dirt. But for me, this tagline had always started with dirt, really started to take hold. And for me, that really stands for when we think about of all the things God could have chosen to create man out of, stars, air, water. He chose the dust of the ground, which is really just dirt. And he leaned down with his breath and breathed life into it. And that, I think of like the vapor of breath mixing with dirt and becoming kind of mud. And if God could create beautiful things in an entire, all of man out of mud, out of the muddiest parts of our story, what can he do with each of our individual stories? And so I think we shy away from dirt. We get scared of these parts of our stories we think disqualify us, that we think will make people turn away from us rather than lean in. And we try to hide that away and put on the right outfit and get the hair curled just right to be the most put together woman in the room because we're terrified if people knew these muddier parts of our story that we would lose them. This book says that's actually one of your strongest superpowers. And when people know that vulnerability in your story, they lean into it because we all have muddy parts in our story.
You have had some interesting experiences. Like you have had, like your life is crazy. So let's just take me through some of the major milestones. Like, okay, from the beginning and some of the things, because you unpack some of this in the book of just like the extremes that you've lived in, the things that you've done. Kind of walk us through that, an overview.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to know is that the trailer on the cover is the trailer I grew up in. My husband Justin actually took that photo the first time I brought him home to West Virginia to meet my family. And somebody asked me recently, Justin grew up in a suburb in New Jersey where they had a Tiffany's in their mall and a Louis Vuitton in their mall. And so now I'm bringing him where you have to go 2.5 hours to Subway or whatever.
Right.
And so what I said was, from the very first second, there was no judgment. That was just a part of my story. And he was drawn to that scene because it made up me. And there's a part in Dirt where I talk about, I asked him once if he ever wished I was just a girl who came to the table with a little bit of an easier story, a suburb, a happy home. And he said, I love your scars like I love your dots, which are what I want to tell you are freckles, but are really just moles. Yeah. He said, when I connect them, it helps me understand who you are. And so I grew up in a trailer, a single wide trailer. You can see that we built on a lean-to addition. That's sort of the thing to do with a single wide trailer. And we put on the roof at some point. And fast forward 20 4 years, and I got into Yale Law School. And that's such a, those two things, exactly that word you use, these are these extremes. They're like whiplash. They're such extremes. And what I think is really interesting about this story is that even if you cannot resonate with this extreme of a trailer or this extreme of the Ivy League, we all find ourselves in the story of dirt because we all know what it feels like to want to run so hard from failure that we stumble into success, and to want to run so hard from these things that we think disqualify us that we just sort of end up becoming the most put together woman in the room, like I talked about. And there's this part in Dirt where I talk about the girl in the red cape. And that was very important for me to include because I think a lot of people who hear a story like this, they can go, okay, so maybe the trailer wasn't great, but it forced you to become who you are, and you ended up with like Yale Law and like success and achievement. So like, what's there to worry about? A lot of people can look at people like us, Christy, who I think have hard things in our story, and we become very, very successful, or we try to achieve really hard. And they think, whoa, like, you know, what a hard problem to have that you just became really achievement oriented. But for me, I said, my running was not like, if I were making a joke here, I would say it's like Forrest Gump where they hand him the football, he doesn't know when to stop. So he runs into the end zone, victory after victory. That's how people see it, I think. But for me, I wanted people to know how primal and visceral and survival achieving can become, where I'm the girl in the red cape clawing her way out of the deep, dark woods, branches clawing at your skin, the big bad wolf ripping at your heels. You feel like if you stop, it just might kill you. But when I turn back breathless and wide-eyed, I see it. I am the girl in the red cape, but I'm also the wolf. And that voice in my head telling me to run and not stop running, that voice is my own. And so, yes, it does result in these highlight reels of success, but when you're in the thick of it, the unhealthy part of that achieving, it can feel like achieving is my oxygen, but it's no way to breathe. Yeah.
I know that people probably thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, many times, probably.
Along the way, the things that you have run from, run to, accomplished along the way, certainly where you come from, it would be easy for people to think like, well, who does she think she is? And, you know, and just think you're crazy. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with people that are, you know, and some of them maybe privately behind your back and some of them maybe to your face, like, what are you doing? How do you handle keeping yourself, even the healthy achievement, even the, my past is not going to define me. I'm going to write my story. Like there's a healthy aspect of that completely. And you're still, regardless of where, why, you know, where it's coming from, you're going to face opposition and people that are going like, what are you doing? How have you dealt with that?
Oh gosh. Not well at times, if we're being honest, but I think it's this. I think, I had a few close friends. They've become close friends. We were in high school together, and they've only recently become close friends. And they were on the launch team, and they got to read the book early. One was 1 year ahead, and one was 2 years ahead. And when we revealed the cover, the one who was 1 year ahead sent me this photo in a DM. And she said, this is what you're doing this for. This is who you're speaking for. And it was just this shack of a house sitting on a hill. And I said, oh, thanks so much, girl. But like, whose house is this? What house is this? And she said it was mine. And I never would have guessed that about her. And she never would have guessed it about me. She was, you know, head cheerleader and homecoming queen, and just, you would never, ever think it. And I've gathered a collection of photos on my phone of people sending me their own trailers. Whether it's an actual trailer, a shack of a house, or just the metaphorical trailer in their life. And so I think that I've learned a lot about perception through writing this. And if somebody doesn't feel like either that's the truth about my story, or they're like, who is she to do that? It's coming from a place of they saw me as one way and I knew the whole story. And that means I might be seeing them as reacting one way, but I probably don't know the whole story. So I've just always tried to come from that place of what I saw in both of them, the year ahead and 2 years ahead girls, was that right after they read the book, there was this moment of like, whew, like, we grew up the same way, and like this is pushing me to go say, like, what can I do now? And like, what do I want to do with the rest of my story? And I think you just have to, with a story like this, you just have to let people sit with it for a little while, and realize that the more that I can be honest about it wasn't easy, and it continues to not always be easy, the less this becomes like an indictment of go do stuff with your life, and the more it becomes a permission slip. That's the hope anyway.
That's so good. I've got a really practical question, but I feel like as I'm thinking about some of the things that you've done and accomplished, coming from where you come from, and you see, people tend to take one of two paths when they come from a lot of adversity or a lack of resources or even just a mindset of like, you're never going to amount to anything. We don't do that here. Who do you think you are? Like if that's the belief system in your family, your culture, your community, whatever, your small town.
Yeah.
Then it's that much harder to swim upstream, to go against the current, because that when you're growing up, your developmental years, that is what is normal to you. That's framing your view of the world and who you are and what you do and what is okay and what is not okay. How have you had this, and maybe you haven't, maybe it developed over time, but this inner conviction and drive and belief that these things are even possible? Because it's like if you don't believe something's possible, you're not going to try.
That's right.
And you didn't really have a lot of reason to believe that it was possible. And so how have you come out of this with not just the drive and achievement, but even just the internal belief that you had even permission to try for it or go for it or,
They say that if a child has one adult in their life who takes an interest in them and tells them that they can do things with their life, that it can change the whole trajectory.
Wow.
And I had a few of them in my life. My grandma Goldie, I talk about her in the book a lot. She is a character, one part sassafras, one part firecracker. And she just thought I hung the moon. And I talk about like she saw me the way that God sees me through grace. And it feels like, who are you talking about? Who are you describing that way? So she saw me as like, I could always be better than where we were. But my dad was the one who was like, if she saw it, he was the one who he got his hands dirty doing it. And so when I was getting ready for kindergarten, he actually started bringing workbooks home so that I would be prepared because he did not feel prepared going to school and he barely graduated high school. And we started in the kindergarten workbooks and then we kept going so that when I started my kindergarten class, I was at a 6th grade reading and 5th grade math level.
Gosh.
And when you start off that way, it becomes this like domino effect, right? And I say in the book, words have the power to speak life or death. And when people call you smart, you act smart. You rise up.
You want to prove them right.
Yeah, you come up to what they expect or you rise and fall to expectations. And I said, when J.R. Best was concerned, there was never any doubt. Much was expected of me. So what's weird is that he expected a lot of me, while at the same time, he always said over himself, kid, this is just the way it is. This is the way it was. This is the way it always will be. He always called me kid. You'll see that in the book. And so I think that's really interesting for parents is what I would say is one, if you feel like you don't have a lot of resources right now, if you feel like you're struggling with money, never underestimate the power of one adult taking an interest in a child's life and what a few workbooks can do. But two, remember to speak those words over yourself because a lot of it is caught rather than taught.
Yeah.
And so we're listening as your kids when you talk about what's possible and what you say is possible for you, we internalize for what's possible for us.
Yeah. And I think we all struggle with that of like, of course, I would speak lots of things over my children and then in my own mind beat myself up. And so I just love that reminder of speaking life, not just over others, but over yourself. There's so many amazing takeaways, but I just love that you're willing to share your story because I'm sure it was super vulnerable, maybe therapeutic, but also vulnerable.
Yeah.
But just like that girl that DM'd you gives hope to people that you're giving a voice to. So tell people, before we wrap up, tell people where they can get a copy and connect with you on social media and find out what you're up to.
Yeah, so the central hub is thebookdirt.com. Yes, dirt.
Yes.
Thebookdirt.com. You can watch the book trailer. You can find out all the little blurbs and endorsements and things like that. And grab a copy if you want. And then it's at Mary Marantz on everywhere, basically. Yeah.
Perfect. Mary, thanks so much. Thanks for your story and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, y'all, I would love to share a few verses with you from the book of Luke as we're talking about the Christmas story. These are some of my favorite verses. Now, the verse that I want to share with you today is verse 38, but first I want to back up and give you some context for what's happening that leads to what Mary says in verse 38. Verse 34 says, "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I'm a virgin." Valid question. The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she, who was said to be barren, is in her 6th month. For nothing is impossible with God." And then in verse 38, Mary replies, "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May it be to me as you have said." And then the angel left her. What I love about these verses and what I love about Mary's perspective is it's such a challenge to me and to you of how we respond to God working in our life. Sometimes God gives us just what we want. Sometimes he answers our prayers and we can see God's hand. Oh my gosh, I prayed for this and God answered this prayer and God provided this, and we just see it and we love it, and we're just us and God, we're in sync and we're in agreement about what should happen, and we are on the same page. And then sometimes we're not. Sometimes God doesn't give you the job. And sometimes God will break your heart. And sometimes you will feel let down and your prayers are not answered, at least not right then, and at least not in the way that you expected or hoped. Sometimes you face disappointments. Sometimes you are not on the same page, and how you think things should go is not the way they're going. And I don't know about you, but I typically, when I'm in those scenarios, I do not respond how Mary responded. I am the Lord's servant. May it be to me as you have said. No, I'm usually throwing a fit. I am. Why are you doing this? Are you busy? Are you distracted? Are you taking a coffee break up there? Like, do you see me? Do you see this is happening? What about this? I thought for sure you were leading me down this path, and then now we're going over here. Y'all, this happens to me on a regular basis. And I am a woman of prayer. I'm a woman of faith. And still I find myself going, God, where are you? What are you doing? This isn't how I saw things going. This doesn't even seem good. You know, interestingly enough, I just got some news yesterday that the path I thought I was on with some plans for my son is not the right path. Like, oh man, I thought that was it. Everything was aligning. I even said to my husband, hey, it seems like God is pointing us in this direction. We're getting affirmation right and left and right. This must be it. This must be what God's doing. And then yesterday, no, we're not going that way. Follow me over here. We're going a different direction. And when I'm in those moments, I just throw a fit and argue with God. God, what are you doing? Help me out. Fix this. Solve this problem. Do you see me? Don't you know that this is how it's supposed to go? And I tell God what he should be doing. And I disagree with the plans he has for me. And I love this reminder from the book of Luke, from Mary. Mary who is scared. Mary who the instructions the angel has just given her are impractical, illogical, impossible. They make no sense whatsoever. She did not argue. She didn't say, by the way, how am I supposed to tell Joseph about this? Or, by the way, how am I supposed to explain this to people that are going, you're crazy? How am I going to deal with the criticism? What's the maternity plan I'm going to have? Anybody? Any more information? No. She doesn't ask any more questions, and she doesn't argue. She doesn't complain about the story that God is writing for her. She simply responds in faith and in obedience. She says, I am the Lord's servant. May it be to me as you have said. Another way to say that would be, I agree with you. I accept this and I agree with you. Okay, this is what we're doing. And we now, reading the story, think it's really cool that she got to be, the mother of the Savior of the world. She probably didn't feel that at the time, I would imagine. She probably felt scared and a little bit crazy. But she still responded in faith and obedience. And that is such a great reminder for you and I, that when God speaks to us in ways that seem crazy, that seem impractical, illogical, impossible, when God gives you a dream or a vision or prompting or guidance to go in a direction or maybe change directions, when God is writing your story and you're in a season where you don't like the chapter, you can still, in faith and in obedience, say, may it be to me as you have said. Thy will be done. God, I agree with you. You are God, I am not, and I trust what you're doing in my life, even though it doesn't make sense to me right now, and even though I may not like it. So I want to give you some journal questions to process as you think about what this means for your life and where you are right now, especially in this Christmas season. The first question is this: where do you sense God leading you or guiding you or prompting you right now? What does he put on your heart, whether you like it or don't? Where have you sensed his presence? Write down your answer. Your second question is this: how have you felt about your own personal story in the past? If I'm honest with you, when I look back on some parts of my story, disappointed, wish I had a different story, wish I had a different path. How have you felt about your own personal story? Is it one you're proud of, or one that maybe you want to argue with God about? Why couldn't it have been differently? How have you felt about your own personal story? Write down your answer. Question number 3. Where have you seen God's faithfulness in your story? When you look back on your story from your past, your childhood, your wounds, there are hurts, I'm sure. There are things you wish were different, I'm sure, like me and like most of us. But I bet when you look back, you also find moments of God's faithfulness, of where he carried you and provided for you and showed up for you and protected you. Let's look at those now. Where have you seen God's faithfulness in your story? Write down some examples. All right, your last question is this. Where do you need to surrender to God right now? Where do you need to open your hands and say, God, I trust you with my present. I trust you with this call. I trust you with this prompting. I trust you with this season. I trust you with this situation. I trust you with this relationship. Where do you need to surrender to him instead of arguing and throwing a fit like I do and maybe you do as well? Where do you need to surrender and instead have the response of Mary and say, I'm the Lord's servant. May it be to me as you have said. Thy will be done. Where do you need to surrender to God? Write down your answer. All right, I'd love to pray for us as we wrap up. God, thank you that you are a good, good Father. Thank you that you are a good God. Thank you that you provide for us, you love us, and your plans for us are good, even when they may not feel good at the time. God, thank you that nothing is impossible with you. Nothing. You are the God of impossible. You can make all things possible. And when we remember that you are good and you can do anything and you know everything and you are for us, then God, it becomes so much easier to respond just like Mary and say, may it be to me as you have said. Even if we don't understand it, even if it seems a little bit crazy, even if we're scared, we can still surrender our lives, our seasons, our circumstances to you. We can still respond in faith and obedience and say, I'm the Lord's servant. May it be to me as you have said. God, give us that posture this season. Give us that posture this week and in our certain circumstances that are stressing us out right now. God, I pray that we would be people of faith and obedience and trust you with our plans and our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all so much for joining me. And of course, you can join me next week for another episode of The Christy Wright Show. And as always, for more encouragement on building confidence in yourself and the God that created you, visit ChristyWright.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Rip, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Rip live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.